Hello everyone, Jolt here from the Thetokenminorities, and welcome to Week 2 of the National Pokeball League. My team, the Toronto Staraptors, are going to be playing the Detroit Gale Wings, which actually is the team that took second place in Season 1 of this league. So, no doubt, based upon that fact alone, this week is going to be quite the tough matchup. But basically, in this video, we'll be going through the team preview as far as the 11 Mons that Kyle, the coach of the Detroit Gale Wings, drafted, and then we'll go through my team building process, and then I'll show you the battle video at the end, so you can see how I did this week. So starting off with the team preview, you can see it right here. He has Infernape, Gothitelle, Azumarill, Thundurus Eye, Latios, Bisharp, Sylveon, Dragalge, Mega Scizor, Swampert, and Skarmory. So at a glance, it is a very scary team, and it's really no surprise as to why he did so well last season. He has a very threatening sweeper core in Azumarill, Thundurus, Latios, Bisharp. Mega Scizor is a very good sweeper too. And then of course he has great coverage with Infernape, and then Swampert for great support, and of course only that one weakness to grass. Skarmory, also very good support Pokemon with Defog, tons of entry hazards, Roost, etc. And then Sylveon is just my little baby. So it's going to be quite the tough game. And then on top of all that, of course, he has the Gothitelle, which is going to be a problem. Immediately, just based upon my team, I see that his Gothitelle, his Thundurus Eye, and his Bisharp are going to be the biggest threats to my team. As far as Infernape is concerned, I do have Pure Counter in that in my Vaporeon. For Azumarill, I have Mega Venusaur to purely counter that. Latios, I have Empoleon to counter that, and etc, etc. So those, the three Mons I just mentioned before, are going to be the biggest threats that I'm going to have to prepare for this week. So let me go ahead and transition over to my team building process. So, immediately upon looking at his team, I noticed that he doesn't have many switch-ins for powerful flying type moves. His only resistance to that, I believe, was the Skarmory, which obviously is going to be, at least most likely, EV'd in defense as opposed to special defense. So with that in mind, I decided to begin my team building process with the Ktothe2, and I decided to give it choice specs such that the Hurricane coming off of this will, of course, put out the maximum amount of damage. So yeah, that was a kind of how I started the building process for this team. I knew that Hurricane was going to hit the majority of his team, and then I also knew that he did have a lot of Mons that were weak to fire, so I went ahead and gave it Heat Wave, and then I gave it Sludge Wave because he did have the Sylveon, and I wanted to make sure that if it was a very bulky support Sylveon, that I would have multiple ways to take it out, as I know from experience that Sylveon can be quite the pain to take out without a little bit of hacks on your side. Then with the fourth move, it was kind of up in the air. I played with the idea of Dark Pulse, I played with the idea of Extra Sensory, but in the end I came down to choosing Knockoff in that slot, just in case I was having some trouble with one of his Pokemon, namely Gothitelle. If Gothitelle was able to trap one of my Mons, I would like to be able to dish out a heavy hit to it, even if it had already gotten up a few Calm Minds. So I went ahead and decided to kind of make the Tornadus a mixed set and add a Knockoff in that slot to hopefully aid me in some difficult situations. So that was the idea behind my first Mon. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I recognized that Infernape was a threat to my team if I didn't bring Vaporeon. So I did end up bringing Vaporeon. And this set is actually kind of interesting. It is a standard EV spread, at least according to the Smogon damage calc, so nothing's really changed on that. However, I decided to run Wish Protect, Scald, and Baton Pass. Now, I ran Baton Pass because I figured that upon his preparation for this game, he would recognize that Vaporeon is my only real answer to Infernape. So, I was expecting him to want to trap my Vaporeon with his Gothitelle and try to remove it with the Choice Specs Thunderbolt. So, in order to prevent that, I decided to run Baton Pass on this Vaporeon. So, okay, so basically how that would work is that if he sent in his Gothitelle, I could just protect to scout for either the Trick or the Thunderbolt, and then I would obviously just Baton Pass the following turn anyways, but yeah, it just gives me a lot more options against the Gothitelle. So with my next Mon, again, he has the Azumarill, so I really have no choice but to bring the Venusaur, and also I was careful with this Venusaur when it comes to the Gothitelle. because if the Venusaur was going to get trapped by a Choice Specs Gothitelle, it would die and I wouldn't be able to do anything about it. So what I decided to do is create kind of a gimmicky Mega Venusaur set, in that I gave it Swords Dance, Power Whip, Earthquake, and Synthesis. Now I know this is hard-walled by the Skarmory that he's certainly going to be bringing in our battle, but I figured that it would be a good lure in a way, such that maybe I can just KO the Gothitelle before it can do anything to me if I can get a Swords Dance up as he switches into it. I did run enough speed on this to outspeed, I believe, a timid Gothitelle, so he'd have to run a Choice Scarf on his Gothitelle to be able to outspeed me. And if he did run the Choice Scarf, then it's not going to be strong enough to take me out in one hit. So the Venusaur was going to be able to dodge the Gothitelle cheap KO, to put it in a way. So yeah, that was the idea on Venusaur, and I chose Synthesis over Leech Seed because I figured that the recovery was going to be of utmost importance, and then Earthquake is there for Infernape mainly as a secondary option in case Vaporeon endures something kind of hacksy like last game, if you recall. So with my fourth option, I brought in Volcarona, seeing as how my team is not too fond of Mega Scizor, so I need to bring my counter to Mega Scizor, even though I feel like just the threat of Volcarona will probably dissuade him from bringing it. I decided that it was in my best interest to go ahead and bring this anyway. I did bring a defensive, a bulky build, similar to the build I brought last game, except now I'm outspeeding Jolly Bisharp by 1, and I'm also running Will-O-Wisp and Lumberry on this. So the idea behind the Will-O-Wisp was such that I will always beat Bisharp 1v1, and I won't have to play with the Sucker Punch knockoff game should he get up a Swords Dance on something else. So the Will-O-Wisp ensures that because I outspeed Bisharp, I will be able to burn it, and that's very nice. And then I have the Lumberry here, just in case I was able to get up 1 or 2 Quiver Dances, and his last resort is to paralyze me with a Prankster Thunder Wave from the Thundurus. So the Lumberry would kind of be the stop to that, and I'd be able to continue my sweeping. So Volcarona was brought because it does put in a lot of work against this team, specifically against the Scizor, and also might pick up a cheap KO on the Thundurus and a cheap neuter of the Bisharp. So with my next slot, I put in Entei with an Assault Vest. Now I did this because my team is terrified of Thundurus Eye. Essentially, if he brings Thundurus Eye and I don't have this Entei, I'm going to get swept. So I brought the Assault Vest Entei, knowing that it can take, I believe, any 2 hits from even a physical Thundurus. I'm not sure on that, I shouldn't say that, but it takes hits from a special Thundurus, at least, very, very well, and that was the kind that I was going to be most worried about. So I brought an Assault Vest Entei with Sacred Fire for that lovely burn chance, and of course that high power. I brought Extreme Speed as my only means of priority, and it's even better because it is a +2 priority move. So it can outspeed the Aqua Jet and such from the Azumarill, even though I'd outspeed it anyway, but whatever. And then I brought Iron Head for the Sylveon specifically. Again, just as an additional means of taking out the Sylveon. And then I brought Bulldoze for the Dragalge, as most people don't see Bulldoze coming from Entei, which is kind of interesting. And I think that's because in the team building process, Bulldoze is actually listed under the, if I can find it, just the moves section as opposed to the usable moves. So that's an error on Showdown's part, and I took advantage of that in this game, and I'm hoping that it'll catch him off guard. So with my last slot, I noticed that what I had so far was going to be weak to Latios, plus I did not have Defog, plus I did not have Rocks. So the appropriate selection for this last slot was the Empoleon over the Gligar, mainly because Gligar is not going to be taking hits from Latios, and I believe Latios has access to Ice Beam, so Gligar would not have been a good option, and Empoleon basically is just a hard counter to Latios. Even an Adamant Earthquaking Latios would not be too much of an issue, because if it is physical, then Venusaur becomes a counter on its own. So that's pretty nice. Maybe not in Zen Headbutt, but Vaporeon would, excuse me. But yeah, and then with this moveset, I brought Stealth Rock, Defog, Ice Beam to hit Latios specifically, and then I brought Roar, again for the same reason. I brought Baton Pass on Vaporeon, and for the same reason, I used a gimmicky Mega Venusaur. Essentially, I don't want my Mons to get trapped and KO'd by Gothitelle, so I have the intentions of roaring out the Gothitelle as it comes in. Maybe it'll give me a Choice Specs, Choice Scarf, or maybe it'll just attack me with a Thunderbolt, but regardless, I should be able to survive whatever happens there. So that was kind of my idea behind this team building process. So now let's go ahead and jump into the battle. Alright, so upon team preview, I was quite surprised at the mons he decided to bring for this game. I mentioned earlier that the 3 biggest threats to my team are going to be the Thunderous Eye, the Ktothe2, and the Bisharp. However, he only brought the Ktothe2. And the fact that he didn't bring the Thunderous Eye is actually going to open up a lot of room for my team, mainly in my Inte that was just going to be used as a switch-in for the Thunderous Eye for as long as I possibly could, but now actually is going to serve as a potential win condition in this game, as most of his team is hit super effectively or cannot take a Sacred Fire easily from this Inte. For example, Skarmory is not going to enjoy Sacred Fire, Sylveon is not going to enjoy Iron Head. Infernape might be a problem, but 1, it doesn't want to take the extreme speed or the bulldoze, and 2, I have the counter to Infernape in my Vaporeon. Dragalge is going to get decked by the bulldoze, and Gothitelle and Azumarill do not want to take the Sacred Fire, and on top of that, Entei is not going to be taking much from Gothitelle anyways. So Entei is a quite the large threat to his team upon team preview, and further, I noticed that the Ktothe2, as I had planned, is going to be very, very good in this game, especially if that Dragalge is offensive, as it's not going to be taking the Hurricanes very well, and really his entire team is going to be taking a lot of damage from the Hurricanes. His Skarmory is his only switch-in, and if I can keep pressure on that Skarmory, I'm going to have a very good time with a lot of my mons. So upon team preview, I'm in pretty good shape, but let's go ahead and jump into this battle. He led off with his Infernape, and immediately I'm kind of expecting it to be a Focus Sash variant, but the fact that he switches out right here tells me that he's probably not Focus Sashed. Otherwise, he would have eaten that Hurricane and probably hit me with a Stone Edge or Thunder Punch or something. So he just goes straight into his Skarmory, and he probably calculated that damage and noticed right away that I am a Choice Specs Tornadus, although it was good information for me as well, as I'm now able to judge the EV spread of the Skarmory, so I can plan accordingly later on. I do just go for a couple Hurricanes there on the Skarmory, and I get the Confusion hacks, but it really doesn't make a difference as he never hits himself in Confusion, so it's no big deal. He Whirlwinds me out, and I decide to just go straight into my Tornadus again, because I want to scout if he has an attacking move. If he has Brave Bird, then I cannot set up on this with Volcarona, but if he doesn't have Brave Bird, then I can set up on this with Volcarona, and I can have a pretty good time, seeing as how the Volcarona is bulky, and if I don't have rocks on the field, then I actually can live the Aqua Jet from the Azumarill. So that was kind of the thought process there. Really, we're just kind of going back and forth with the same exchange. I am just feeling him out, waiting for him to reveal all of his moves, and he isn't doing so yet. But here I missed the Hurricane, and he finally does just go for the Brave Bird. Now see, it does about 50%, so I obviously need to get out of there. Luckily, I do have Regenerator, so I'm not too concerned about the fact that I just lost half of my health. Plus, I do have Wish support with Vaporeon, so I will be able to get that back later if I need to. I just go straight into my Empoleon here, simply to defog away the Stealth Rock, and knowing that this is going to be perfect switch-in to the Skarmory, plus I can threaten him with the threat of Scald. So here I go into my Vaporeon on the Infernape switch-in. He makes a nice play, goes for the U-turn to get a little bit of momentum here. He just goes straight into his Sylveon, which I'm not sure is a play I agree with. Seeing as how it's not going to be able to do a whole lot here as I just go into my own Empoleon. I guess he was trying to get some health back with the Dragalge that took the blow earlier, but I'm not going to let that happen as I do have Roar, and it's just going to bring in the Skarmory, and it's not going to get any health back from the Wish because I hadn't lost any health in the first place. Here I get a crit freeze, and I'll pause here. I personally don't think this crit mattered too much. He does throw a fit about this crit, or this crit freeze rather, and I guess I can't blame him, but when he does have a Cleric Sylveon, freezes on something like this, a Skarmory that's not going to be like a win con in your game, sure, it sucks, but it's not really going to be game changing. Okay, he can easily just go into his Sylveon on this Empoleon, get off a free heal bell, and everything is just fine. So the freeze here I don't think really matters, but it did happen. So hacks is hacks, and I guess it was a little bit of justice from what happened to me in the last game. He decides to just go straight into his Azumarill here, which he likely is trying to treat as a lure. So what I decided to do here, I knew this was risky, and if he was a choice banded Azumarill and he went for the superpower, this was going to hurt a lot. But I decided to instead of going into my Mega Venusaur, which is the obvious switch, I decided to go into my Vaporeon just in case he wants to pull a double and try to trap me with Ktothe2. Luckily, I did get this play correct, and I'm able to go into my Vaporeon on the Ktothe2, and sure, I'm a little worried about the Specs Thunderbolt, but I do know that I have Baton Pass and I can easily just get out of there, and I won't be in any real danger at this point. So that was a good play on my part. I'm glad I made that risk, and it paid off in the end. That does, however, give him a switch into his Sylveon, and he's just going to go ahead and Heal Bell off that freeze here, and like I said, because of that sequence of events, the freeze earlier really didn't matter. But here I'm just going to go into my Entei, as now I'm going to be able to use this to eat up Hyper Voices, and I can just switch in Entei on Sylveon all day long. So if he's going to be relying on his Sylveon to be a cleric for his team, to be the wish support of his team, he's going to have a hard time, because now Entei is going to be able to just go on a heyday against him. Here, as he protects, I decided to go for Iron Head, which may not have been the best decision on my part because it is revealing that I'm not banded, and if he wasn't calking the damage from Sacred Fire, I could have actually used that to my advantage, but I did just go for the Iron Head here on the obvious protect turn. So that might have been a misplay on my part, but it's really not that big of a deal because I still can threaten him with the Iron Head, and I'm just going to go for it again right here as it goes into his Dragalge. And that's fine. I get about 22%, so he likely thinks he's going to be able to live this next attack and maybe get off a Draco Meteor or something, but here I bop him with the Bulldoze. So the trickery works out here. He did say in the chat that he did not expect to see a Bulldoze on the Entei, so that was a small reward on my part, I suppose. But here he goes into his Infernape and just goes for the Rock Slide, trying to get super effective damage on the Entei, and I just go straight into my counter, the Vaporeon, and he actually packs Thunder Punch, and it looks like Iron Fist on this Infernape, perhaps an Expert Belt, judging based upon that damage, so it does a good chunk of damage to this Vaporeon, and that's good information to have. But the good news is, the Thunder Punch did 55.9%, so as long as I have my leftovers on this Vaporeon, I actually am going to be able to still counter this Infernape, even though it does pack the most power, or the most effective move it could to combat a Vaporeon. Here I just protect, and he goes for the U-turn, so this is just good, valuable information. I'm able to scout out more of his moves, which is always very nice to know against the Infernapes, as they can be quite threatening just due to their incredible versatility. So yeah, I go ahead and Wish Protect again just to get all my health back, and he decides to try something else. He U-turns out on the Vaporeon, knowing that he's really getting nowhere at this point. I'm just going to keep spamming Wish. Maybe I can stall him out of Thunder Punches. Maybe I can catch him going for something other than Thunder Punch on the Wish turn, and then I can react accordingly, as really my matchup is very, very good in this game. And I am just going to go for the Scald here on this Skarmory, and I get the nice burn, which he again is quite upset about, but burns are burns. Scalds have 30% chance of getting them. It's the reason the move is run, and hacks is part of the game, so I'm sorry, but that's just kind of what happens here. He just goes into his Infernape, and I decide to Baton Pass the Wish into my Tornadus T as the safest option to get my Tornadus back at full health, knowing that it's going to be a huge threat to his team. He only has the Skarmory to switch in on it, and yeah, so that's what happens here. Here I pulled the double into the Empoleon, which works out. I was a little bit worried about the Hyper Voice coming from the Sylveon on the Tornadus, so that's why I made the switch, but the secondary reason for making the switch was just in case he wanted to go back into a Skarmory, and I just have Empoleon out here, and maybe I could win the Hazard War. But he makes some nice plays there and is able to get his Skarmory in there and get those Rocks up. So now we both have Rocks up, and that's a thing. So here I go straight into my Tornadus T, and I'm just going to go for the knockoff because I'm tired of the Skarmory being able to heal itself back up, and I know that if I can get rid of its leftovers, I'm going to be able to put in a lot more work against the Skarmory, and essentially is going to free up more opportunities for Entei to pull through this game. So here I just go into Entei, and I go for the double Sacred Fire. I get the burn on Sylveon, which again is a 50% chance to get the burn, but I did get it in this case, and it is going to allow me to 2-hit KO it. Here he misses the Rock Slide after I go for the Extreme Speed, and this really does suck for him because this was his... He had two opportunities, I'll say, at this point to pull back this game. This was a very crucial turn for him, though, because he needed to get rid of this Entei in order to have any chance of winning this game. He needed to get rid of Entei right here, but unfortunately he misses the Rock Slide, and as a result, I'm going to be able to go ahead and take him out with the following E-Speed. So I'm really sorry about that. That does hurt, but he just goes into his Azumarill here, and I figured that even if he was going to Aqua Jet, it was ideal for me to go ahead and go for the Sacred Fire, because I don't want him to set up a Belly Drum. It really doesn't matter, though, at this point what I do, because I do have the Venusaur at very high health, and I'm going to outspeed the Azumarill and KO it with the amount of investment I have with the Power Whip anyways, assuming I hit the Power Whip. But so really, this turn, again, didn't matter too much in the end. The game was pretty much over at this point. He does just go for the Belly Drum anyways, and I get the burn with the Sacred Fire, but I'm going to be able to go ahead and take him out with the Extreme Speed here, and Azumarill goes down, and all he has left is the Gothitelle and the Skarmory, and neither of which are going to be able to deal with this Entei. So this game is going to get wrapped up in a fashion that no one really anticipated. There was a little bit of hacks on my side, but I also missed a lot of Hurricanes, so it's the RNG balanced out, but I do admit that I got pretty lucky with some of my RNGs this game, and it ended up with a very convincing win on my end. So I will put out the disclaimer now that Kyle, Ktothe2, did not have as much time to prepare for this game as I did, so his team selection probably wasn't as good as it should and could have been. He's a much better battler than what this battle showed. So we're still happy with the win, don't get me wrong, but I'm looking forward to whenever I can get a rematch with him when we're both playing at our best. I think it'll be pretty fun. But on the bright side, the Toronto Staraptors did grab their first win of the NPL, so we are now sitting at a pretty 1-1 record, and we play my buddy Togevoir next week. His team is called the... let's see. His team is the Portland Timbers, and he has a pretty scary looking squad that you see here, and I'll be planning for that this week. So I hope you enjoyed this battle, and let me know what you think of the general layout, general format of how I did this video compared to how I did the week 1 video. Let me know if you liked how I went through the team building process and such. I'm still kind of experimenting with this to see what the viewers enjoy the most, because it's the viewers' concerns that I really care about with all this right now. So thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you next week.